Testing, testing. Testing, testing.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. If we could ask everybody, please take your seats and ask the chambers to come to order. And excuse me, the first item of business is the roll call to establish the presence of a quorum.
Supervisor Wasserman?
Here.
Supervisor Cortese? Supervisor Yeager? Vice President Chavez? And President Smidian. We have a quorum.
The presence of a quorum having been established, we're going to ask that you all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, which will be led today by Supervisor Cindy Chavez.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States
of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. That takes us to item number 103, which is public comment. Public comment is that portion of our agenda set aside for comment by members of the public on non-agendized items properly within the jurisdiction of our board. Let me look to the staff to see if we have any cards, speaker cards for public comment. Additionally, colleagues, with your consent, I thought we might follow the same practice that we used yesterday, which is to allow folks who are here to speak on other budget items to speak early on. We do have one card under public comment, so I'll ask Mr. Largent to approach the podium. But again, for those of you who are here on other items and would like to speak now, if you turn your card in with the proper item number, we will give you the opportunity to speak now. If you would prefer to wait until your item comes up in its regular place on the agenda, that's certainly fine as well, but we just want to give folks the opportunity to speak and then get back to their daily routine if they need to do so. So, Mr. Largent, we're going to look at you and say welcome. And, of course, you know you have 3 minutes under public comment, and then for regular agenda items, it will be 2 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Scott Largent again. I'm preparing for, I have a court appearance on the 2nd, and it's to fight the order that I was arrested for out in front of our family court. I was out there civilly and peacefully protesting with a kid's toy, of course not blocking a sidewalk, and the county is going to prosecute me over this. So I'm preparing for this case. I'm very concerned about using the Independent Defense Counsel. After watching Victorious get railroaded, I'm worried that our county counsel's office is playing puppet with our attorneys. I brought this up a lot. I have a meeting with my attorney, Dimitri Stadlin, which is provided by the county. He did a very good job defending my rights with the Bullhorn trial, just to the extent of what he was able to do. He can't go too hard at it with the establishment. I was pulling over my old case files involving this. This was another one where I was across from the San Jose Police Department a couple days before Christmas. I was out there protesting, civil and peacefully, wearing a Santa hat, and Chief Garcia thought it was necessary to throw me in jail, apply bail, basically throw the key away, try to keep me in there for a little while and keep me quiet. It's another thing what Patricia Lucas has tried to do to me, make up these fake, phony orders to try to get people not to be able to speak up about the problems with our system. These orders that Patricia Lucas has come together with are just a load of crap. I'm very upset that the county's not taking any of this stuff seriously. I know, Joe, that it just kind of went over one ear and the other, and I know you never could address this. James, I've never even heard from you regarding any of this stuff. This is hard to believe that this is happening in America. And if you guys read the language in this, besides just using it as wallpaper up in your offices, you would understand how bad this really is. I mean, they have pushed people way across in your St. James Park. You can't go out in front of our courts here. You can't protest over at the police department. You just can't do any of this. And pretty soon they're going to spread this legal hustle right here, right out in front of your county building here. It's going to come soon. And right now, I am requesting more and more people's files that are just like me. These are people just like me. You guys familiar with Kerry Andrew Crittenden? The guy that put a lot of stuff up online about the county. He exercised his First Amendment right. He was upset about some of the things that happened to him. He's another one that was railroaded. Okay, he was another one. He ended up in San Quentin prison for 9 months. The county charged him with, I believe, 20 different counts of contempt. Victorious was charged with, I believe, about 14 counts of contempt. Susan right now is going through 4 different charges right now, and then they'll try to get stay-away orders to keep her out of here. And with this order right here with Scott with no record, after I go through my jury trial with this, what are they going to do? They're going to try to get stay-away orders. They're going to try to keep me from coming around the courthouses. And sure enough, if I slip and get out of the lane here, you guys will try to do the same thing to keep me quiet. It's our First Amendment right to be able to come in here and speak up. Please protect it. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that is our only speaker under public comment. That being said, we do have a couple of folks who've asked to speak on agendized items. Sunny Ochoa, if you would like to come up and speak right now, you may on item number 110. And then we also have a card from Laura Clendaniel, who would like to speak on item 111.
Hello, my name is Sunny Ochoa, and I am representing Healthier Kids Foundation. I'm actually the agency's director of programs. And I just kind of wanted to give some highlights of how this year's been with us. We are going to wrap up 70,000 services. As of today, we've provided 19,000 dental screenings. And something really exciting about Healthier Kids Foundation is that we provide case management to all of our children that have vision, dental, and hearing issues. And our staff shared some really great stories. And one family this year that has had a dental issue, mom did not suspect it. The child never complained about having any pain, but she did notice that the little boy had really bad breath. And through our case management and going to the dentist and learning how to use her Denti-Cal services, she realized that that was an indicator of decay. And they went in, that child received treatment, and he's now has a dental home, and he's going to the dentist regularly. We have also had an outstanding year for our vision program. We have screened roughly 27,000 kids for vision issues. Of those kids, 1,800 have actually gone to see an optometrist, and we've put over 1,500 kids in glasses. Last year, I had the wonderful pleasure of having my first child, and he was screened this year, and at 13 months, he got his first pair of glasses. And he has astigmatism, which means that his eye is shaped like a football, so everything he sees is not clear. And I have that opportunity as not only to help the entire community, but I have the opportunity to make sure that my child has the best vision possible in his life to flourish. Lastly, our hearing program, as of this morning, has also screened 19,000 kids. With over 300 of them being case managed to see a doctor or an optometrist. We're serving those in the lowest communities of Santa Clara County and making sure that they're accessing the services that they need for their families.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Clendaniel. I'm also here on behalf of Healthier Kids Foundation, a family-forward health agency that gives children and those who love them the education and cutting-edge tools that they rightfully deserve to live a healthy life. At Healthier Kids Foundation, we believe preventative care at an early age makes things fair. Every day, we work side by side with families to identify and eliminate kids' health issues before they even begin. Because without us, barriers that could be corrected may stand in the way of kids' success in the classroom and in life. Healthier Kids Foundation is instrumental in ensuring families access appropriate health coverage and services for their children in Santa Clara County. Over the last 5 years, Healthier Kids Foundation has supplied 190,000 services in Santa Clara County at over 900 community-based sites. We are known for efficient and effective screenings. However, the real value in Healthier Kids Foundation's work is the case management. We do what it takes to find health solutions for every family and have case managed over 38,600 cases. With each of these cases, we make sure that families have insurance, know how to use it, and get their children the care they need. With Healthier Kids Foundation's help, over 5,000 children have received glasses. 6,000 have received dental treatments, and 14,000 have been enrolled into health insurance. Without Healthier Kids Foundation, these kids' needs may have remained unidentified and unmet. With the additional funding we received from the county for the current fiscal year and other funders, we were able to increase the number of services provided by 35%, primarily in Morgan Hill, Gilroy, and Alum Rock school districts. This year alone, we will provide 70,000 services to children and families. The support from the County of Santa Clara has been vital to this success and growth. Our partnership is what has allowed us to continue to make profound impact on children and families in our community. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. Just going to confirm with the clerk, I believe that's the last of the cards at this point. It is. All right, that brings us back to our agenda. And again, if there are those who wish to speak on agendized items, when we get to those items, please be sure you turn a yellow card into our clerk. She'll share it with me and we'll call you up at that time. That takes us then to item number 104. Under overview, this is to receive the report from the administration relating to requests for information during the budget hearing and any new and or updated information. Dr. Smith?
Greg Ituria, Budget Director, will do this.
Mr. Ituria?
Members of the board, Greg Ituria, County Budget Director, and this morning added to the agenda was an updated tabulation of revenues and expenses for the budget based on the changes the board directed yesterday at the first day of this hearing. It's of course subject to final determination of the board on Friday, and at this point we simply ask the board to accept this new information.
Thank you very much. We'll ask the clerk to please display the voting panel on our screens. Board members, are there comments or questions on this item? This is 104. If not, we have a motion to approve by Supervisor Chavez and a second by Supervisor Wasserman. All members please vote on their screens. And will the clerk please display the results? The motion passes 5-0, and we are on to item 105. We are now under Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, and this is the County Executive's revised recommendation. Dr. Smith, am I turning to you or again to Mr. Ituria? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is a request to consider revised recommendation for the Santa Clara Valley Medical Center budget related to recommended budget proposal to add staff for the migration of the BMC accounting system.
Thank you very much. Could we ask that the clerk please display the voting screen on our desks? Thank you. Are there comments or questions? Supervisor Wasserman.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, President Smidian. I'll be voting yes for this to handle 105, and my question will be on 106. Excuse me.
All right. We'll ask all 5 members please vote on the screen. And now we'll ask the clerk to please display the results overhead. And item 105 passes on a 5-0 vote. And that takes us to item 106. And again, I'm going to look to Mr. Ituria, I gather.
Yes, thank
all
you.
Right.
And this is a request to consider revised recommendation for BMC related to positions for staffing services. This is a technical correction requested for the number of staff that's going to be changed between medical translator and medical translator trainee positions from 6 to 5, and because between the time that the recommended budget was published on May 4th to this date, one of the positions that was intended to be changed was filled, and so we'll at this point unable to delete the filled position until such time another vacancy there comes up, and we'll be able to address it. So it's a timing thing that kind of got caught early last month.
Comments or questions? Supervisor Wasserman, were your questions addressed? Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. I just have one question related to this issue. Do we do an assessment, or how would you do an assessment over the need for this position in general? And I'm asking this mostly because as it relates to language services, it seems like we're such a diverse facility that it was hard to know. Did we just decide, like, or is, I don't know.
I see Mr. Lorenz making his way
Thank you.
forward. Mr. Lorenz, you have anything you'd like to share?
Good afternoon, members of the board, President Simidian. So when we open the recruitment, first of all, the action actually allows us to do alternatively staffed positions, and so allows us to get a greater candidate pool for individuals that meet the minimum qualification. With respect to individuals applying, individuals can have various language skills and backgrounds, and depending on our need, we attempt to fill those positions accordingly.
What I'm wondering is, how do you do a needs assessment based on whether or not this is even the right number of people? And the reason I'm focused on it is from a language perspective, it appears, at least from my last couple visits to the hospital, that every language under the sun is spoken, and that you can't always use a blue phone, and you don't always have staff available. So I was just wondering how you ended up on this number, and whether or not there was an evaluation mechanism that you're using to determine this is the right number of people and these are the right languages we have available?
There are a couple things that we look at. One is the number of calls that are coming in on the campus relative to the specific specialty clinics. And should we have staff available for that language, we actually try to make them physically available for the program. And then, of course, we utilize probably about 154 different languages via the language service line, for which we connect the interpreter with the program via phone. And what we do on a regular basis is look at our current capacity relative to the phone demand and what our capacity is with respect to specific languages. So it's an ongoing evaluation. I can tell you that we can always use language interpreters for Valley Medical Center and the health and hospital system.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommended action on item 106? We do. Supervisor Chavez has made the motion. Supervisor Yeager has seconded. All members have now voted, so we'll ask that the results be displayed on the board overhead, and the motion carries 5-0. Thank you again, Mr. Lorenz. Takes us to item number 107, County Executive's revised recommendation relating to new psychologist classification positions. Mr. Ituria?
The recommended action is to add 2 chief psychologist positions based on analysis and work between ESA and the department.
All right. Are there any questions from members of the board? If not, we'll ask that we have a motion from a member of the board to approve. Thank you, Supervisor Wasserman. Is there a second? There is from Supervisor Chavez. All members please vote on their screens. And now that all have voted, we'll ask that the results be displayed overhead, and the motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Takes us to item number 108. Mr. Ituria, am I back to you?
Yes, and item number 108 is a County Executive revised recommendation to provide $1 million in funding to support the cost of the Roots Community Health Center.
Thank you. We have a comment or question from Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. So this is great, a great investment, and I know, Dr. Smith, this is something that you and Ken have taken great leadership on, so thank you for that. One of the things I was curious about is whether or not we have been examining a more permanent home for the Roots Clinic, and in particular, I was wondering if we had done that in partnership either with our housing department or if they've been partnered up, our housing department, with the Roots Clinic. And mostly I'm just curious about whether or not there's a shared housing opportunity with that organization.
The Roots Clinic has indicated that they are at a point now where they need to expand to a new location. However, we haven't actively been participating with them in finding a new location. We've had, obviously, there's been financial issues that we've had to deal with and resolve. But once those get cleaned up, I think it's fair to assume we'll be sitting down together and trying to find another location or another way to expand.
You know, one of the interesting things about their model that that I don't think I fully appreciated is that in Oakland they have like jobs attached to it. We often think about housing attached,
right,
but not so much workplace. And I thought that was very interesting, and it made me curious about whether or not the opportunity to look at lands that have not yet been converted in downtown to from industrial to housing may also be an opportunity where there's some mixed use, in particular around the 3rd Street area. But just, it mostly got me thinking because I'd had a tour of it maybe a few months ago, and they were talking about like a soap factory and some other
right,
work that they're doing in Oakland that I didn't know about.
Yeah, they have an opportunity for individuals who are their patients who have challenges with work to work in their soap factory, establish a set of credentials and a pattern of work, and then that helps them with finding other jobs. And they've talked about doing that here, but I'm not sure that they're ready to do that yet.
That may be something
we'll
to
talk
scale
to
up.
them about it.
Great, thank you.
Interestingly enough, the soap that they make is sold in the gift shop at VMC.
Is that right? Thank you.
Let me just ask if there are no other comments or questions before we take action on this item. My recollection is that we allocated something like $3.2 million a year or two ago for the construction and first year cost of the clinic, and now there's another million being allocated here. Is the expectation that at some point this is going to be self-sustaining, or that we'll have a relationship similar to some of the other the clinics that we contract with in the county? It's a little bit, seems a little bit different from the norm, and I don't know if that's just startup or where we are in this process.
Yes, we expect them to be self-sustaining. This $1 million has to do with issues relating to billing and capture of revenue that have occurred in the last last year, and basically will keep their head above water while those are all getting straightened out.
So looking ahead to next year, what's our hope and expectation in terms of where we find ourselves when we're at the time where we're evaluating for the budget year +1, I'll call it?
I don't expect any lump sums unless there's something special like Supervisor Chavez just talked about, moving to a different location or creating some kind of augmented service, in which case the board would have the opportunity to participate in that or pass on that.
And related question, and I'm going to look to the county council because I want to be careful about what I ask and how I ask it and in which venue, but do we think that the health center is currently compliant with contractual obligations to the county?
What I'll say is I think that we think that this budgetary allocation is okay to move forward at this time.
All right. I'll let it go at that. We'll ask the clerk to please post the voting panel, and we'll see if there's a motion. There is from Supervisor Yeager. Is there a second? There is from Supervisor Cortese. We'll ask all members to please vote on the screen. And all votes have been cast. We'll ask that the results be displayed. The motion carries 4-0 with 1 abstention. Thank you very much. That takes us to item number 109.
And 109 is a request to consider all of the recommended budget for VMC as inclusive of the adjustments that the board members just reviewed, and also including the budget units for the Senate Bill 12 and Children's Health Initiative funding, and ask that you refer the item for final consideration to this Friday.
All right, thank you very much. We'll ask the clerk to display the voting panel. We'll see if there's a motion. There is, and or a second. There is. And do we have any comments or questions? We do not. All 5 members having voted, we will announce the vote by displaying it overhead. Passes 5-0, and we're on to the next items. And colleagues, it looks to me like items 110 and 111 might actually benefit for some joint conversation.
Yep.
So, Mr. Dr. Somebody Smith, okay. Thank you.
Well, these aren't recommendations. These are inventory items, but I would like to make a suggestion from staff. We've had for a number of years contributions to the Healthier Kids Foundation, having to do with their very excellent efforts at screening children across the county in schools in hearing, vision, and dental screening. The suggestion I would have is that if the board desires to provide this service on an ongoing basis, rather than having this come up every year as an inventory item, which leads to instability of both their finances and question marks in our finances, it would be better to fund a bridge bridge amount, number of dollars for a bridge amount while we're doing a RFP. And so I think 111 envisions moving ahead with an RFP for these screenings, which would get us completely in compliance with board policies and procedures, and allow us to enter into a long-term contract. And I think 110, if I'm reading it correctly, sort of suggests the creation of ongoing funding. So you might want to merge those two together, pick a number for bridge funding, direct us to do an RFP, and that will be a long-term contract, I would imagine, in the 5-year contract period with renewals.
And when you say a bridge number, presumably a bridge number involves a bridge period of time.
Right.
Did you have a bridge period of time that you wanted to share with us before we turn to the board? I don't know if you're talking 3 months, 6 months, a year, year and a half.
Well, the number that was chosen by Supervisor Chavez of allocating $584.10 for 2 years came from prior requests. I would suggest maybe that you just do the 584 for 1 year, and we'll have the RFP done before that's up. And that way, I really don't think the RFP will take longer than about 6 months. I honestly don't really believe there's any other provider that's likely to bid, but county processes being what they are, it's the best way to proceed.
All right, Supervisors Yeager, Wasserman, and Chavez. Supervisor Wasserman's mic was on first, then Supervisor Chavez, and I have no light yet from Supervisor Yeager, but now I do. So there you go.
Thank you. And am I addressing, through the chair, my questions to Dr. Smith or a different staff member as far as what services would be provided or requested in the RFP? How do you want me to handle that?
Well, I think I can give you a general idea. What we would envision is doing an RFP for those three sets, those three types of services: vision, dental, and hearing, as well as some of the other referral processes and procedures that currently are being done by the foundation.
Thank you. And I have specific questions, and it sounds like you're the right person to ask. I just wanted to direct them through you or to you. So first of all, I think the program is worthwhile. I think the results are significant. I've participated a few times. I think the benefit the county's providing and has been providing for years has been excellent. I'm certainly open to the idea of the RFP. I do agree that Healthier Kids would apply, most likely be successful as far as being able to provide the services. I just wanted to make sure, Doctor, that in the RFP, it seemed to me when I was looking at 110 and 111 and knowing the program that as I know it now and what's being proposed in 111, I just wanted to make sure the outreach was the same. What my concern was is that the way it's being done now, where it's reaching out to all these various schools, and again, I've attended several of the demonstrations in the schools, versus what I thought during the workshop a couple of weeks ago that I heard was a proposed idea, which it seemed different from 110 and 111. 110 was we were reaching out to the schools and reaching more kids. 111, it was more like we'll do an RFP, but the kids have to come to us more, say our clinics or other places where we provide services, and then be screened. You're shaking your head no. If that's not the case, I'll be happy to make a motion that we do just as you suggested, and we fund for the 1 year, the 584,100 amount, and at the same time give direction that an RFP be prepared and go out. And so by the time the RFP process is culminated and we found a suitable provider of these services, that we can transition over to that. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a reduction in services, that there wasn't a reduction in outreach.
That's not what we're envisioning. Maybe some of the confusion came from some ideas that we've had from a staff perspective about increasing funding. We still would envision the outreach in the same way. However, as you remember, all of our clinics are FQHC certified, and you're allowed with FQHC clinics to create a satellite entity. For example, what we do with the homeless van, where you could actually have these services provided basically where they are right now, but be able to bill Medi-Cal for those services because screening is covered under Medi-Cal, so that you could bring down additional funding from the state and the feds and expand the program even more.
Thank you. So President Simidian, with that said, I'm happy to put forth the motion, hope to get a second. We'll have some discussion. And it sounds like I've got an assurance from the CEO that we would continue the outreach that we currently have, that those services would not be diminished. And getting to the RFP process is fine, and funding the program in the meantime is fine with me. That would be my motion.
We have a motion on the floor, and we're going to go next to Supervisor Chavez.
So thank you. And I know this feels a little confusing, and I want to make a slightly different recommendation. It appears to me that both 110 and 111 make, actually, if I'm looking at Ken at yours, that Ken's item A, that you're looking at the 984,000 for, am I right, about for 1 year?
That's correct.
So the only thing I'd like to think about is I like the idea of taking the 984 for 1 year and then doing the RFP so that we're fully funding the agency for the year. And that way we're not trying to do makeup with the RFP for the second half of the year, but we can really start fresh and then get it on a specific timeline with multi-year funding. Again, I think your point about keeping it up in the air, since we know we need this service, is less than productive. I think it's causing a lot of stress and time, very time consuming. So what I'd like to ask you, if we could move
584 to 984?
Yeah, and just do it for 1 year with an RFP within 6 months to be completed.
Through the chair, if I may?
Please.
Thank you. The inventory item we brought forward was for 584, and I hear your suggestion making that 984.
I'm using Ken's. I'm suggesting we take Ken's recommendation because we were funding part of the program. Ken looks like he was funding the entire program, and that may make sense to do for 1 year if it's going to have an RFP attached to it.
Supervisor Wasserman, would you like to wait a minute until we hear from Supervisor Yeager, who may want to share with us where that number came from and why he's proposed it? I'm just thinking.
Yeah, well, I'm going to repeat some of the motions that people have mentioned, but again, my recommendation is that we set aside the $984,000 in the budget for whomever is selected with the RFP, but that we then allocate funds, and it really was for Dr. Smith to sort of decide what that amount was for the bridge funding until such time that the RFP is granted and people then start spending the $984,000. So the $984,000 is sort of in a separate pot. These will be ongoing funds for the person who wins the RFP, but that we will then allocate, I suppose, up to the 584, exact number isn't right before me, that would be used for the bridge and however much money that is spent.
Okay, we have at least 3 or 4 intriguing ideas out there. Supervisor Cortese, I see your microphone is on.
Yeah, I have no idea. So 110, as written, calls for 584,100 of ongoing funds for 2 years. I'm understanding the RFP would be would go out prior to 2 years. And I'm understanding that the motion would, and 110 is a single payee, Healthier Kids Foundation. Is it assumed that the 984-100 of ongoing funds would also be a single payee, or would multiple agencies possibly be awarded those dollars?
I think we would do an RFP for a single respondent.
Okay.
But
So what happens if 110 is extended at 984 a year for 2 years and the RFP is awarded to a single payee during that 2-year period? Is that not going to happen? I don't understand why we need both in a 2-year period. That's what I'm really asking. We need to pay.
what I was envisioning, and of course the board can do whatever they would like, would be bridge funding for Healthier Kids Foundation during the time period we're doing the RFP, then awarding the RFP with funding going forward at that point of the 900,000 plus. I mean, we would, when we do an RFP, we would envision what we think the cost will be, and obviously the respondent would give us exactly what it would be, so it could well be more than 900.
Right.
That it would be less.
I'm just, what you're saying is not the same as what's written here. What's written here under 110 is allocate 584 ongoing for 2 years, and then I'm understanding the friendly amendment request is would change that to allocate 984 100 for 2 years, not allocate 984 100 as bridge funding until the RFP process is completed, which is what you're saying. They're
I'm
two
probably
completely different statements
confused.
under A, possible action A.
Right. I probably
I
confused
believe.
the process because from a staff perspective, the two inventory items are a little bit in conflict with each other. So I was suggesting a third approach different from the two inventory items that might meld them together. In 110 envisions the granting of monies for ongoing current services, which would then have to come back in the future in a repetitive process. 111 is talking about doing an RFP just like we would do an RFP with a typical CBO. So I was suggesting the board might consider melding the two. But of course you can do whatever you'd like.
I'm going to go back at this.
Through the chair, I'm just saying I'm fine with the approach. I just don't understand that I've heard any motion yet that actually does that.
Yeah.
But it's possible. I just need the motion repeated. I just haven't heard somebody say change 110A as follows.
I want to go back to Supervisor Cortese and make sure he's had a chance to complete. Supervisor Cortese, you're good for the moment?
Yes,
thank you.
That's my question. I'll leave it out there.
All right. Then I'm going to go back to Supervisor Wasserman and then to Supervisor Yeager, if you'd like, sir.
Thank you. One question through the chair to Dr. Smith. The 984 number being proposed for up to 1 year of dollar amounts, is that number acceptable to you as far as the budget? Okay.
Yes.
Then the motion maker will accept the friendly motion, increase the first year's dollar amount to 984 with direction to staff to prepare and conduct an RFP process to find somebody to provide ongoing services similar to what's being done now. That's as concise as I can make it.
And we have a second now from Supervisor Chavez. Supervisor Yeager?
Well, Supervisor Wasserman, it doesn't sound like included in that was the money for the bridge funding until such time that the contract is awarded. Did you?
Through the chair.
Please.
Thank you. The 984 was the bridge funding. That covers 1 year. County exec's guessing an RFP will take about 6 months. So the suggestion is when the RFPs, there won't be duplicating of money. So if we're doing a 1 year contract of 984, if it takes 9 months to get the RFP, then I see the RFP kicking in, the 984 stopping, and the RFP starting. that work?
Whatever the board wants works.
Well,
that's what I see as the bridge.
yeah, I mean, there's any number of ways to get to the exact same place. So I'm not sort of concerned about that. I just want to make clear. I think what I was attempting to do as to fuse the two items together was to sort of, was to say that we will allocate the $984,000 for the RFP that will go out, and, and it will, for however long that contract is for, is what the money will be over the years, but that to fill the gap is to use separate money, asking Dr. Smith how much he thought that would be. He doesn't quite know yet. We could certainly allocate, let's say, the 584, whatever it was that was in yours, to spend down, and then once the contract is signed, then that money sort of goes away, and then the 984 then kicks in.
Okay, I think we're saying very much the same.
We are.
We are. I think the CEO doesn't quite know if it'll take 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. So the intent of the 984 was to be for an annual amount. And again, wherever the RFP is in place, I would foresee that 984 ending and the RFP starting. So I don't know if that number will be 500, 600, or 700 bridge money until the RFP begins. I just wanted to make sure that the services continue until the RFP kicks in.
Right.
And I think that's what we're all saying.
Right. There's, like I said, any number of ways to get there. We could start spending money from the 984, and then when a contract is signed, we can allocate those dollars. So
yes,
both would work.
Let me see if I can add to the confusion. I am fundamentally sympathetic with the notion of let's try and do a one-year contract, make sure there's no interruption in the services that are provided, and continue to use the same provider for continuity's sake. Then, meanwhile, while all that good work is going on, doing the RFP, and so by the end of one fiscal year at the latest, we would have a provider chosen through the RFP process, and then presumably the costs associated with that would come back to the board for consideration.
Right.
The reason I'm struggling with some of the back and forth that I've heard is it's a little hard for me to understand what the rationale is for going from a $584,000 proposal for the coming fiscal year's services, which the memo from Supervisor Chavez and Wasserman indicates is based on the fact that this is the amount that since 2014, an amount no less than $584,100 to provide an array of services. So I know where that number came from. I now have a number in front of me, though, for the coming year that is almost but not quite twice as much, without an understanding of what the rationale for that is. And when I ask where does the number come from, it appears to come from Supervisor Yeager's proposal, and the $984,000 number, Supervisor Yeager or Dr. Smith represents what, and how is it different than $584,000? And please don't tell me it's more. I know that it's more. I'm trying to figure out why did somebody say the stuff we've been doing at $584 a year should become $980,000. That's what I'm trying to sort through. So let me go first to Dr. Smith and or Ken, and then eventually, Supervisor Yeager, and then I'll get to Ms. Chavez. Got everybody's title wrong today, and then to Mr. Wasserman as well. Dr. Smith, I thought I heard Supervisor Yeager say the 984 came from staff. Did I get that wrong?
No, I believe it came from Healthier Kids Foundation as far as what their annual costs were. I think we were approaching this from two different ways. That also, remember, in the past, there were inventory items, but there was also budget funds that were put in by Dr. Smith, and so it was a question of which pot you were looking at. But the 984, as far as we know, is what it costs for a full year to provide these services. That's where my number comes from.
Got it. And the reason 584 was initially requested, Supervisor Chavez and Wasserman, was what, if I might ask?
So we were trying to address the measure. So last year we did a joint inventory item for $400,000, for services that allowed them to expand services, including into South County. Concurrent to that, this year, their Measure A 2012 money ended. So we were spending $584,000 out of Measure A, and we added this additional $400,000 for an inventory item, which brought them up to spending, which we wanted them to do, $1 million on all this work. We then came forward trying to fill the Measure A bucket. It looked like Ken came forward trying to fill the whole bucket, and that's why we're all still having this conversation.
Understanding that you're trying to fill the Measure A bucket, does the $400,000 that you did in an inventory item, was that a one-time only item?
I can't remember if it was 2 years, 1 or 2 years. Actually, Kathleen?
I think it was just last year.
It was 1 year.
1 year.
Yeah.
It was just last year.
So the $984,000 figure that you're proposing would, in effect, substitute for the 584 plus the 400.
Correct.
The 400 is not ongoing because it was a one-time only allocation, and we're not talking about adding 400,000 to 984,000. We're talking about the 984,000 all in.
That's right.
That's correct.
Dr. Smith, does that sound right to you?
Right.
Mr. Arteria?
And then we go get an RFP.
Okay, and then we go get an RFP.
That's all it is.
All right.
Yeah, the 900 will keep the services going while we do the RFP. If it takes a year, you're completely allocated. If it takes less than a year, then we have to reassess.
And
come
what
back with
percentage
the
of
contract.
Healthier Kids' operating budget is that? I'm just not mindful of whether they do other things. Is that? 1/3. Thank you. Just ballpark, trying to get a sense. Thanks. Supervisor Yeager, your mic is on.
No, at this point, I understand the intent of the motion, which is certainly my intent as well, and happy to support what's on the floor.
Supervisor Cortese, did you get your question answered, sir?
I think so.
Supervisor Wasserman?
Thank you. I'm good with that.
All right. Then we're going to ask all 5 members of the board to please lean forward, vote on the screens. We have a motion from Wasserman, a second from Chavez. It is to provide funding in the amount stated for 1 year while an RFP is commenced with the expectation that the RFP will be completed in time for budget action in the coming year. And all 5 members having voted on their screens will ask that the results please be displayed. Measure passes 5-0, and thank you for a very illuminating conversation to the board. All right. That takes us past 111 because 110 and 111 were folded in together, so we should now be at item number 112. Thank you very much. And is this, when I turn to Mr. Arteria again?
Yes, this is a request to consider revised county executive recommendation.
Excuse me for interrupting through the chair, if I may.
Please.
Tried to grab it before.
My apologies.
Thank you. No problem. I see 112, 113, and 114 all under Community Health Services, and with your consent, would make a motion to approve all 3.
Let's ask Mr. Arteria to present all 3, and then we'll ask for the motion at that time if that's agreeable. Thank you, Mr. Wasserman.
Okay. Yes. Item number 112 is to provide maintenance funding for the PACE clinic due to loss of revenue. That way they can sustain the services. Item number 113 is a revised recommendation to provide staffing at the STIC clinic. And then item number 114 is to consider these adjustments and for the recommended budget for community health services to Friday.
Thank you very much. Now, we'll ask the clerk to please display the voting panel. Supervisor Wasserman, before I go to you, I see Supervisor Yeager's mic is no longer on, so I'm going to go back to you, Supervisor Wasserman. Would you like to make a motion?
Thank you. I would. To approve staff's recommendation on items 112, 113, and 114.
I see that a motion has already been made by Supervisor Yeager. Supervisor Yeager, was it to that effect? All 3 items? Thank you. And a second from Supervisor Wasserman. All 3 items are up. We have no comments or questions on these 3 items, so if members will please vote on their screens. And we're waiting on just one of our colleagues. And all votes have been cast, so we'll ask the clerk to display the results. And all three of those measures are approved on a 5-0 vote. That is 112, 113, 114. And colleagues, if we engage in clumping, as I referred to it yesterday, if you need time to make your way through your notes and your papers, please just raise your hand and we'll take a moment or two. Understand that depending on the number of items, that may be desirable. All right, that takes us then to the Public Health Department. And we have two items here, 115 and 116. Mr. Turia, do you want to indicate these?
Yes, item number 115 is to consider the recommended budget for the Public Health Department and refer to Friday for final consideration. And 116 is an inventory item regarding evidence-based programs.
Thank you. And I see someone from the Health Trust is here, and I'm certainly available to answer questions, but if somebody would simply like to make a motion on both these items or on just 115. So we have the button is up. We have a motion from Supervisor Yeager for both items. Thank you, Supervisor. And a second from Supervisor Wasserman. We will ask all all 5 members of the board. And before we announce, Supervisor Chavez, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. Really, this is a question for staff, and I think I'd raise this with another item that Supervisor Simitian brought forward relative to language, essentially language brokers, and this appears to be in similar alignment with that sort of idea that we need to make sure we have connectors that are language and culturally appropriate to make sure people access services. Is that right, Supervisor Simitian? On this,
I'm not sure I understand the question. I apologize.
what I'm wanting to better understand is as we develop RFPs and RFQs, that we make sure that we're embedding in those RFQs and RFPs this language capacity, because I do think it's an evidence-based practice, and you've brought this forward a couple times, and it feels like something that, for lack of a better word, it really should be built in as a core practice for the county instead of necessitating additional resources, because in some instances the additional resources are very necessary in that you're working in a particular area, especially where we have new communities coming on board. And it was sort of why I asked the question relative to language earlier. But what I'm really wanting to ask the staff to consider is how we embed in to new RFPs and RFQs for very particular types of services, specifically around health and mental health. This idea that we have cultural brokerage built in where we don't have professionals and or paraprofessionals that have the language skills, that we're really thinking about this as a best practice.
So is that a request to the staff or?
Yeah, this is a question really for Dr. Smith in terms of the best way to approach this this body of work long term.
The good question. The state law requires the delivery system, which is VMC, to have access to certain languages when they reach a particular number of in the population. But what you're talking about, I think, includes CBOs and could potentially include other contracts that we have. So I would suggest that you give us some time to go back and come up with our own individual county policy that probably will mimic to some extent the state policy, maybe expand it a little bit, but so that it applies to pretty much everything that's a service rather than just VMC. And
it might be worth engaging the Office of Cultural Competency around this, because it does, I think first of all, I think this is something that in fact I already voted yes. I think this is really exciting. It just prompted this question about how do we build it in a more core way. And frankly, where we can't do that, then therefore, how do we triage languages, countywide or other kinds of cultural brokerages? One of the examples that I'll just mention to Supervisor Simitian that I think has come through Children's and Families Seniors Committee is we've been trying to use something similar with foster care through the African American community in terms of having cultural brokers that can interact early with families. And so it's ended up being something we've needed because we don't have the professionals on staff, but to be frank with you, it's also something that we determined was a newer need, and so it wasn't built into the core practice. So thank you, Dr. Smith, that would be helpful.
Thank you. We have 4 members voting. We need 1 more member to vote, but there's a question, Supervisor Cortese.
Yeah, I just have a request that I'd like, reference to the motion if my colleagues don't disagree, and that's with regard to the Diabetes Prevention Initiative strategic plan, that we get a quarterly dashboard on the implementation progress. I mean, just give, just from the executive summary without, getting into the weeds on all the various different things that are intended to go on here, which are all great. Just from the executive summary alone, raise prediabetes awareness, establish screening and referral protocols, and increase coverage for access. Just 3 examples of things that are supposed to happen, and they seem like 3 really good examples as a starting point to establishing a 8.5 by 11 report that would be distributed to the board, so we know what this investment is looking like in terms of actual progress on outcomes over the course of any given year.
Let me just quickly confirm with the maker and the seconder and the rest of the board, there's no objection to incorporating that request. There is no objection, and so the motion will stand with that amendment. And if we can get 1 more member, and we have all 5 members now voting, we'll ask that the results be displayed on the screen overhead. And items 115 and 116 are approved 5-0 as amended. Thank you all, colleagues. That takes us to Custody Health Services, 117, 118, 119, 120. Mr. Arturia, you want to walk us through those?
Yes. Item number 17 is revised county executive recommendation relating to the psychologist classification series, adding 2 positions. Number 118 is a request to consider recommendations related to the Custody Health Services and refer it to Friday for final approval. And then number 119 is county executive revised recommendation to the Custody Health Department, adding 4 clinical nurse 3 positions. And then number 20 is consider the revised budget for Custody Health and referring it to Friday.
Thank you very much. I see a light on Supervisor Cortese. All right, that's from a prior item. Would anyone like to make a motion? Supervisor Yeager, is this to move approval of all 4 items? Yes? All 4 items, Supervisor Yeager? Thank you. And there's a second now from Supervisor Wasserman, again on all 4 items. We'll ask if any member wishes to make comments or offer questions about any of these items. If not, we'll ask that all 5 members please vote on the screen. And all votes having been cast, we'll ask the clerk to display. All 4 of those items, 117, 118, 119, and 120, are approved 5-0 as contained in our published agenda. Takes us to behavioral health, where we have items 121, 122, 123, and 124. Mr. Ituria, do we turn to you again to walk us through these 4 items?
Yes, and through the President, item number 21 is a revised recommendation for the Behavioral Health Department, allocating $4 million to provide behavioral health services at the Muriel Wright Center. Item number 122 is a revised county executive recommendation for behavioral health, deleting a social worker position and rehabilitation counselor position due to the loss of funding. And then item number 123 is county executive revised recommendation for between the Behavioral Health Department and Social Services Agency, transferring positions that are in the recommended budget that are better aligned, if adding them to Social Services Agency rather than Behavioral Health. And then, adding them to Behavioral Health rather than Social Services, excuse me, just the opposite. And then item number 24 is consider these revised recommendations along with the recommended budget for behavioral health and referring them for final consideration to Friday.
Thank you very much. All right, colleagues, we're going to ask the clerk to display the voting panel, see if there are any comments or questions on any of these items. There do not appear to be so. I have a motion from Supervisor Yeager and a second from Supervisor Chavez. Supervisor Yeager, just to confirm on the record, that is for all 4 items. It is confirmed. All right, as is the second. Then we'll ask, in the absence of any questions or comments, ask all 5 members to please vote on the screen. And we have one more colleague who we're waiting on to vote on the screen. And now we have all 5 members voting, so we'll ask the clerk to display the results. And those items are approved on a 5-0 vote. Again, for the record, items 121, 122, 123, 124, approved 5-0 as submitted. Takes us to emergency medical services, 125, 126. Mr. Ituria again.
Item number 25 is to consider the county executive's recommended budget for emergency medical services, referring the item to Friday for final approval. And item number 26 is an inventory item relating to CPR in schools initiative.
All right. Do we have a motion on those 2 items? 125, 126. I believe those are the 2 items. Supervisor Yeager.
Happy to make the motion. I do have one question, though, on 126. Is it possible that we could use EMS trust funds to pay for the AEDs? That's what we had done in the past, and thought that would be a good source of funding.
To Mr. Ituria.
Yes, absolutely, and we can have that teed up for Friday.
All right, that'll be then part of my motion.
All right. So, motion by Yeager on both 125 and 126. Can we get a second? We have a second from Supervisor Chavez. Thank you. If we could ask all 5 members, please vote on the screen. Any other comments or questions? Seeing and hearing none. All votes having been cast, we'll ask the clerk to display. Those 2 items, 125 and 126, pass on a 5-0 vote with the clarification as to source of funds, EMS Trust Fund for item 126. Thank you. That takes us to Valley Health Plan, items 127 and 128. Mr. Ituria, back to you.
Item number 127 is to consider revised recommendation for Valley Health Plan. Upon consultation with ESA, determined that a different classification is needed for the intended use. Item number 128 is asking to forward the recommended budget for Valley Health Plan to Friday for final consideration.
All right. We'll ask the clerk to please display the voting screen, and we'll see if there are any comments or questions. If not, would somebody like to move approval on Supervisor Chavez? Just to confirm, that is both items, 127 and 128, confirmed. Second by Supervisor Cortese. Supervisor Yeager and I need to vote on our screens. And having done so, we can now announce that the vote is 5-0 on both items. Again, that's 127 and 128 as submitted. Takes us to the Office of the District Attorney. We have 4 items here, 129, 130, 131, and 132. Mr. Ituria, to you.
Yes, item number 129 is to consider revised county executive recommendation for the Office of the District Attorney to allocate 2 alternately staffed senior paralegal and paralegal positions. Item number 130 is to consider revised county executive recommendation adding $300,000 of one-time funding for contract services to process outstanding SART kits, as well as adding 2 criminal list 3 positions, alternatively staffed 2 and 1 for related work, and to refer the item for final consideration to Friday. Item number 131 is to consider a county executive revised recommendation for the District Attorney's Office budget inclusive of these adjustments, and refer the entire recommended budget to Friday for final determination. And then item number 132 is to consider a budget inventory item relating to the crime gun intelligence program investigator position.
Thank you very much. If we can ask the clerk to please display the voting panel, and we'll see if there's a motion. There is. That's a motion from Supervisor Wasserman and a second from Supervisor Cortese. And gentlemen, I believe that is on all 4 of these items, yes? And Supervisor Wasserman would like to speak first, and then we're going to go to Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. I was happy to move that. I just wanted to make sure Supervisor Cortese wished to speak about item 132, or if he was okay, but I see he seconded. So are you okay through the chair, Supervisor Cortese, or?
Yes, thank you. I think the item is self-explanatory. I do want to thank the district attorney for their collaboration on this, for his collaboration on this, particularly in terms of finding some internal revenue sources to apply to this to make it a little bit more of a match with the general fund than it would have been if we were trying to pick up the whole cost. And it looks like it'll really help in terms of its objective, reducing violence by firearms. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And back to you, Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I also wanted, through the chair, to thank Dr. Smith regarding the funding for the paralegals. Thank you.
All right, Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. On item 130, I wanted to better understand how this budget allocation impacts the overall goal of hitting that 30-day benchmark. And really, I don't have my glasses on, so let me look.
I think we should ask the DA to
excellent.
explain it to us. Mr. Rosen, could you explain it?
And while he's coming up, I do really just want to extend a thanks to the District Attorney's Office for their leadership on this issue. It's been really tremendous.
Mr. Rosen, welcome.
They all work?
Yeah,
all the
it's
mics?
so weird.
So, Supervisor Chavez, we're trying some different things at the crime lab to try to reduce the amount of time that it takes to test SART kits. Currently, as we know, our average was 94 days, and we want to move that to 30 or as close to 30 as we can get. We've already started to do some different things. So we've taken DNA analysts in the crime lab and created a team that will only work on SART cases. So that's the first thing that we did. The second thing is having the resources to test the unused kit, the kits that haven't been tested yet. The backlogged ones will help bring our average down. And then the additional resources will get us, it's hard for us to know whether we'll hit the 30-day mark or not with 2 additional analysts. We may need a third, we may not, but we're certainly going to get a lot closer to that. And the third thing that we're doing already is, while we currently triage which kits we're going to test when, so unknown perpetrator kits, we test within 7 days. But in addition to that triaging of kits, within each kit, we're also triaging. In other words, we're looking at the places in a kit that are most likely to yield results. So I'll be specific. So, we're going to look first, vaginal swabs, rectal swabs, for instance, because that's where we're most likely going to find male DNA. So that triaging of kits, we think will also reduce the amount of time it takes to test kits overall, because doing that kind of triaging, while it's more work at the front end, we think it may help us not need to test those individual kits further, and so we'll therefore get those kits processed faster. So there's a few moving parts with this. There's the backlog being removed, there's additional resources, there's a team that we're putting in place, there's a different way of triaging the kits themselves. And so what I had thought is I would report back to the board in a year as to what our average is and see where it is. I know it will be below 94. Maybe it'll be at 30. Maybe it'll be a little bit higher than 30. And then we'll know at that time whether we'll have a better idea at that time, if it's not at 30, what the issues are. Is it simply that we need another DNA analyst, or is there something different we could be doing?
And then, thank you for that, and thank you for being so thorough. And I do, before I keep asking you questions, want to say thank you to you and to your staff. They've been just tremendous.
You're welcome.
On that subject, one thing I remembered being discussed, and I don't know if it got addressed, was that one of the pieces of help you may need wasn't necessarily a criminalist, if I'm remembering this correctly. It may have been administrative staff to make sure we were doing faster and better coordination with the police departments. Is that something that's still on your radar?
Yes, we believe that's something that we can use paralegals in-house to do. So in other words, to track the kids that are at the agencies to make sure they're coming to us in a timely fashion, because the additional resources for the crime lab to get the amount of time it takes to process kids down significantly is once the kids are at the crime lab. In order to make sure that the kids get to the crime lab more quickly, we need to make sure that the agencies are sending the kids to us, and that's something that we can have a paralegal track and then follow up with phone calls and emails if there's kids that are outstanding.
So one thing that, when you give your report back, I'd really be interested in understanding how that collaboration with the departments is going, because one of the other issues that was raised, and I apologize that I can't recall whether or not this was someone from the crime lab or this was someone from the DA's staff, was helping us understand that even prior, like when you get a bunch of material from a crime scene, even knowing what among that material really needs to be tested, was one of the things they were saying is that it was sometimes very difficult to get a hold of the investigating officer, and I'm not sure about, I mean, to get a hold of them in a timely fashion to get all of this work done. But I'm not sure if you feel like that's something that has become less of an issue, or if that's another kind of paraprofessional. I would just be interested in us understanding that as you proceed and learn more.
Okay, we'll look into that.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And pardon me, and Dr. Smith and the DA, I just want to thank both of you for working together to get these positions in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we ask for all members to vote on their screens, we do have one card now from Trevor, and forgive me, Trevor, I simply cannot read your last name handwriting. That's not a critique, it's just a fact. So I have a card from Trevor, and then also from Oscar De La Torre on item 129. Gentlemen, you want to come on down? Welcome.
Welcome. That's my chicken scratch. I'm a criminalist, so actually that's why I type everything. So I am the chief steward for SCIU at the DA's office. We would like to thank the supervisors. Where did Jeff go? Jeff Rosen, the DA's office administrators, particularly Peter Jensen, as well as Dr. Smith, for hearing our concerns and recognizing the need for more support staff at the DA's office. While the addition of 2 paralegals would definitely help, we need more support staff beyond these 2 positions, and we think that's definitely justified and warranted. So we look forward to working with you all in an effort to find a workable support staff ratio and to decrease the judicial delays in our county. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, and my name is Oscar Del Toro. I'm a paralegal at the DA's office, and I'm going to follow up with what Trevor Gillis said. And thank you guys for the addition of 2 additional paralegal codes to our office. But I believe that that's not enough. Jeff Rosen, our DA, originally requested 4, and I think that was actually a low number, because I'm a paralegal that does all this work. I was a paralegal in the sexual assault team for the last 4 years, and I've actually worked on a lot of the cases that you guys were referring to earlier. And definitely having more paralegals, secretaries, clerks at the DA's office, and bringing the ratios within similar to the ratios of paralegals to attorneys, secretaries to attorneys, as other departments within the county, like the public defender's office and county council. I believe our office has nearly 190 attorneys to 36 paralegals, whereas the public defender's office has roughly 120-something attorneys to 34 paralegals. And then when you can see the numbers at county councils, I believe they're around 60-something attorneys to 25 paralegals, and they have 3 supervisors. So if we could bring all the ratios to be similar within the departments, we all have the same classifications, and we should all have the same type of workload. And so if in the future, when you consider the next budget, please take that into consideration. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both, gentlemen. We're going to ask all 5 members of the board to please cast their votes at the screen. And Nicole
Baldacci.
exactly. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, sorry I'm late. I was just finishing up work in my office. I just was trying to watch the video to keep track of the timing. I just wanted to come in and thank everybody for listening to our concerns the past few times that we've come up to speak. We really appreciate your taking into consideration to get the 2 additional paralegals. It definitely will help everybody out in the office. It's definitely not the end. We do still need other support. Clerks, secretaries, probably still a few more paralegals because like I said last time, we do have other units that were recently created and we need more support for those new units. But right now we appreciate that this is a step forward and I just wanted to be another person to thank you and we look forward to working with you guys for more steps in the following fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, all 5 members of the board have cast their votes. We'll ask the clerk to please display the results. And that passes 5-0. And again, that was item 129, 130, 131, and 132. Takes us to item 133, a single item under Office of Public Defender. Turning again to Mr. Arteria.
Item number 133 is for the Office of the Budget of the Public Defender, and it's to consider the county executive's recommended budget for the public defender and refer it to Friday for final determination.
Thank you very much. We'll ask the clerk to display the voting panel. I see that the public defender is with us. If there are any questions, board members, if there are no comments or questions, a motion has been made by Supervisor Wasserman. We could use a second. We have a second now from Supervisor Yeager. If all 5 members would please vote on their screens. And that having been done, we'll ask the clerk to please post the results. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. That's item 133, and the measure passes unanimously. Items 134 and 135 are under the Office of Pretrial Services. Mr. Iteria?
Item number 134 is to consider a revised county executive recommendation for pretrial services, replacing the recommended position based on consultation with the Employee Services Agency. And then item number 135 is to consider the revised recommended budget for pretrial services and forward it to Friday for final consideration.
Thank you very much. We'll ask the clerk to display the voting panel, and then we'll ask if there are comments or questions. And if not, we'll say thank you to Supervisor Wasserman for the motion. Supervisor Yeager has seconded. We'll ask all 5 members to please vote on their screens. That having been done, we'll ask the clerk to please display the results. And items 134 and 135 are both approved as submitted on a 5-0 vote. Thank you. That takes us to criminal justice system-wide costs. Item 136. And that is a single item, Mr. Iteria, yes?
Yes, it is, and the request is to consider the recommended budget for criminal justice system-wide costs and to refer it to Friday for final consideration.
Thank you very much. We'll ask the clerk to display the voting panel. Colleagues, can we get a motion? We have a motion from Supervisor Wasserman and a second from Supervisor Yeager. We'll ask all 5 members to vote. And now that they have, we'll ask the clerk to display the results, which indicate a 5-0 vote to approve the criminal justice system-wide costs. That is item 136. That takes us to item 137, Office of the Sheriff. Again, one item. Mr. Iteria.
This is item number 137 to consider the recommended budget for the Office of the Sheriff and to refer it to Friday for final consideration.
Thank you. Before we bring up the screen, we do have one card on item 137, and it's from Roger Winslow. Mr. Winslow, if you'll come forward, please, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Roger Winslow, the Vice President of the Deputy Sheriff's Association. I stand before you with frustration and just absolute awe at the dysfunction of this last budget process here at the Sheriff's Office. In years past, when we had a working relationship with Sheriff Smith, we would actually have meetings before the budget process to determine what is working, what's not, and what we might be able to do for the future year. That has not happened for several years, and neither has this, and I will echo my frustration from last time. Is with all the problems we brought to the county and the sheriff in the last couple of years, not one single proposal deals with any of those issues. Today we stand at 100 vacancies. We have 2 more leaving by the end of this month. And I know now we're going to cut 7 codes out. It's disappointing, but we do understand the county executive's explanation. Disappointed to see the inability to provide those services, but it is. We look forward to better working relationships with the county, we hope, and with the sheriff, whoever he or she may be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we will ask the clerk to please, I apologize, Ms. Winslow, my apologies.
That's okay, my fault. I forgot to ask for a follow-up. You had a few questions that you had from the last budget session last week. One of them was the actual vacancies, and the other was what was the overhead, and I was wondering what the follow-up on that was. Thank you.
Your timing is propitious, because I'm going to ask the clerk to display. She has. We have a motion. But I am going to say, my understanding, Dr. Smith, is that some of the confusion around vacancies was a function of the difference between sworn and non-sworn.
Correct.
Okay. And so the vacancy rates and the numbers, I think some were talking about sworn only and others were talking about non-sworn, and that had some impact. Then on the issue of overhead colleagues, I do have a response back from the Sheriff's Office. Candidly, I don't find it particularly helpful. This was a question that was prompted by the parks item where we reduced dedicated support to parks, and I was struck by the fact that the decrease in salaries and benefits was $876,000, but that the decrease in reimbursement from parks was $1,400,000, which is means that somehow there we had overhead from County Central Services at $198,000, as I understand it from the response that we've received, and overhead from the Sheriff's Office of $307,000 for a total of $500,000 overhead on $876,000 in salaries and benefits. The response I got was not as helpful as I had hoped it would be in clarifying that. I'm going to ask the management audit team for a 40-hour audit on that one on my own hook and see if I can get a better understanding of what that's about. So that leaves the item up on our screen, and we have 5 members, 2 of whom need to vote on the screen. So if you haven't yet voted on the screen, please do so at this time. And all votes have now been cast, so we'll ask the clerk to display, and the budget item for the Sheriff's Office, item 137, has passed 5-0. Thank you very much, and I see the sheriff. I thought I saw the sheriff and staff here, so thank you very much for being with us. All right, that takes us to the next items.
May I just stop for one
Please.
moment? Just to, Carl, is this your last budget? Yes. Shame on you. You will be missed.
Thank you. Takes us to Department of Correction, item 138 and 139. And Mr. Iteria.
Item number 138 is the county executive's recommended budget for the Department of Correction with a request to refer it to Friday for final consideration. And item 139 is an inventory item regarding the installation of AEDs in County Main Jail and Elmwood facilities.
All right. We'll ask the clerk to please display the voting panel. We have a motion to approve by Supervisor Wasserman. And
just one quick question,
please.
President Smidian. Is it also the intent on this one, Supervisor Chavez, this is on your item on 139, to use money from the EMS Trust Fund if possible?
I think that would be great if it's appropriate, and I don't know if Mr. Iteria or Dr. Smith want to weigh in on that.
There is adequate funding in that fund, and it's an allowable use. So if it's the board's direction, we can prepare that for final consideration on Friday.
Great, thank you.
They will include that into the motion.
That's great.
Thank
yes. Well, I don't know who made it.
So Supervisor Wasserman made the motion. Supervisor Cortese seconded. Without objection either from the maker or the seconder or any other member of the board, we will incorporate that direction regarding the use of trust funds. And there is no objection, so it will be incorporated, and we'll ask all 5 members to vote on their screens. And that having been the case, we'll ask that the votes be displayed, and the motion carries 5-0. And again, that is on both items under Department of Correction, item 138 and 139, as amended with respect to the use of trust funds. Then, Probation Department, we have 4 items, 140, 141, 142, and 143.
Item number 140 is to consider a revised county executive recommendation to allocate $402,762 for the Center for Employment Opportunities Contracted Services. Item number 141 is to consider a county executive revised recommendation for one-time funding for wraparound reinvestment funds for an agreement with Unity Care Group. Item number 142 is to consider a county executive revised recommendation to revise, to delete one automotive attendant position, but allocate that same amount of funding on an ongoing basis for a new position that will be created after a job classification review with ESA. And then number 143 is to consider the county executive's recommended budget with these adjustments and refer them to Friday for final consideration.
Thank you very much. We'll ask the clerk to please display the voting panel. Colleagues, are there questions? Supervisor Yeager, I see your light is on. Nope. Prior item. We have a motion to approve, Supervisor Wasserman, all 4 of these items, items 140, 41, 42, 43. And we have a second from Supervisor Yeager. I see no questions or comments from members of the board. All votes have been cast. We'll ask the clerk to display. That motion carries 5-0, and again, that is to all 4 items under the Probation Department. Takes us to the Medical Examiner Coroner, item 144, and we'll ask the clerk to please display. Mr. Ituria.
Item number 144 is to consider the county executive's recommended budget for the Medical Examiner Coroner and to refer it to Friday for final consideration.
Thank you. And I'll just indicate, members, you may or may not recall that I asked a question about why the 10% increase, 9.9, I believe, technically, for salaries in this across the board in this organization, or I shouldn't say across the board, I should say in total for this organization. I did get a response back. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Having gotten the response back, I'll be a no vote on this item. So we'll ask all members to please vote on the screen. And again, this is item 144 for Medical Examiner Coroner. All votes having been cast, we'll ask that the results be displayed. And that passes 3-2. Supervisors Simidian and Chavez voting no. And that measure does, however, pass 3-2. Thank you. All right. That takes us to item 145, closing. Are there any other items of concern that have been referred to the administration for review and report, which are properly taken up at this time? Mr. Ituria?
Yeah, at this point, I did take note of the request for the quarterly dashboard from Supervisor Cortese. We also got the notes from the compromise item regarding Healthy Kids Foundation related services, and also the changes for the use of the EMS trust fund for a couple of the items. If there are anything else from the board, we can prepare to follow up. Otherwise, that'll be it.
I see no lights on from my colleagues. Items 146 and 147 are relevant only if we have a 6:30 p.m. continuation of this hearing. We do not. That takes us to item 148, which is simply to recess our meeting until tomorrow, Wednesday, June 13th, at 1:30 p.m. in these board chambers without objection, and there is none. We will recess until that time. See you all tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. in these board chambers. We stand in recess.